Madam President, I come to the floor to talk about the pending business, the supplemental appropriation bill that came over to us from the House of Representatives. In February of this year, I was in Munich for the security conference. And the question that was asked to me the most, just by about every world leader, is whether the Congress would pass the Ukraine supplemental appropriation bill. Our colleagues around the world understood how important the supplemental appropriation passage was to the security of Ukraine and its ability to defend itself. Now, Madam President, I want to tell you, when I was asked that question by the world leaders, I said, yes, we would pass it. I don't know if they were so convinced that we would get it done, and I'm not so sure how convinced I was at that time that we would be able to reach a point where we would be able to keep the supplemental intact and be able to pass it. For you see, the aid in that supplemental is so critical to the defense of Ukraine. Ukraine is literally running out of ammunition. U.S. leadership is actually absolutely indispensable. It also, of course, includes the humanitarian assistance and so many other important issues, but it also represents U.S. leadership, the ability for us to keep the coalition of the democratic states and the West together in our campaign to make sure that Mr. Putin does not succeed in taking over Ukraine and then moving to other countries in Europe. But now we can definitely answer the question. By our actions in this body, we can tell our friends around the world that, yes, the supplemental appropriation will pass and will be signed by President Biden, and the aid will be flowing to Ukraine to defend itself. So much depends on the passage of this supplemental. First and foremost, it's the defense of Ukraine. Incredibly brave people in Ukraine that are holding up the defense against the great, mighty Russian army. And they've been very, very successful. But they need to have the ability to defend themselves. And that's what they're asking the United States to do. Not to provide the soldiers, but to provide the wherewithal so we will not have to send our soldiers to Europe. It's the front line for defense of democratic states, for we all know that Russia will not stop with Ukraine if they're successful, that Moldova and Georgia, the Baltic states, Poland are all very much in the view of what Mr. Putin wants to take over. But there's more to the supplemental than just Ukraine. There's the financing for the Middle East. Israel's defending unprecedented Iranian drone attacks. We saw that last week. They need our assistance to make sure that they can protect against these missiles and drones. We know the leaders of Taiwan looking to the passage of this supplemental because they have to look across the Taiwan Straits at the People's Republic of China and their aggressive language and their concerns about whether China will use force against Taiwan. The passage of this supplemental gives great hope to Taiwan that the United States is with them. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the humanitarian workers that are desperate to help in the Sudan, they need our resources in order to meet that crisis that is going on every day. And the passage of this supplemental will help the humanitarian workers deal with the humanitarian crisis that we have in Sudan, that we have in Gaza, that we have in Ukraine, and so many other areas around the world. So, yes, it's been difficult to understand the delay in getting this done, and it's affected Ukraine's ability to defend itself. The delay in getting the supplemental to the finish line. So it's absolutely essential, as Senator Schumer said, that we complete our work as quickly as possible and to remove any doubt about America's support for Ukraine. And if there was any doubt, Madam President, the vote in the House of Representatives on the Ukraine package passed by a strong bipartisan vote of 311 to 112. Now, the entire package enjoys strong bipartisan support, and that's critically important for our success of our foreign policy. $60 billion for Ukraine, $26 billion for Israel, $8 billion for Taiwan and our Indo-Pacific partners, $9 billion for global humanitarian assistance. But in addition to the the appropriations that was in the bill when we passed in the Senate months ago, the House added some additional provisions, which, quite frankly, Madam President, I think all strengthen the bill. It provides a way to hold Russia accountable for its own actions, for the damages that it's caused. That's a positive addition to the package. It strengthens our sanctions against some of our most extreme adversaries. That also strengthens the bill. And I was pleased that there is a reauthorization of the Elie Wiesel Genocide and Atrocities Prevention Act, a bill that I authored, that deals with trying to avoid conflicts from turning into genocide or atrocities. So we can prevent having to deal with the current challenges that we see in so many parts of the world. We need to invest in prevention, and the Elie Wiesel Act gives us that tool to do that. I want to recognize President Biden for his leadership on these issues, his leadership globally in keeping the coalition together in support of Ukraine and our foreign policy objectives in the free world, and also for what he did here in the United States, staying true to the principles, connecting the dots for the American people, and dealing with a strategy so we can finally get this bill to the finish line. So I congratulate the Biden administration for staying with this and helping us reach this moment where we're on the verge of passing the Supplemental Appropriation Act. It reinforces our foreign policy that's rooted in our values, that promote human rights and defend democracy, a foreign policy drawn by basic human decency. That's what the United States foreign policy is about, and this supplemental reinforces our objectives in each one of those categories. This gives the world a credible vision of the future, a future that discourages dictators and autocrats, a future for a Europe whole and free, a future for a thriving Indo-Pacific, a future for a peaceful and prosperous Middle East, a future that prioritizes civil society movements and human rights around the world. Madam President, I know that the challenges we face today on the global stage seem immense, because they are. Anyone can see that. Russia is relentlessly bombing Ukraine's oil and gas sector. Ukraine is running out of ammunition. But shortly, we will take an historic vote, a vote that, as President Zelensky says, gives Ukraine a chance of victory. So, Madam President, I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for the supplemental that passed the House of Representatives. I urge you to vote yes, yes to fund America's foreign policy and national security priorities, yes to supporting the war-stricken people of the world who will not give up hope for democracy, yes to standing up with our allies and partners across the globe, yes to a future American leadership on the global stage that is based on our values. With that, Madam President, I would yield the floor.